Mr.
Obama.
You know, the President of the United States.
My subscribers want to know about education,
The lack of jobs for college graduates.
the economy,
Racial profiling, that's a good one.
Net neutrality.
unemployment.
Peanut butter or jelly. Finally, Mr. President.
Who's your favorite YouTube creator?
Hello everyone, my name is Steve Grove and I'm the director of the News Lab at Google, and it is my pleasure to welcome you to a YouTube interview with the President of the United States. Mr. President, thanks for having us here today.
Great to see you, Steve. Thanks.
We're really excited for this interview today. I should tell our viewers just what a YouTube interview is.
Right.
We've invited 3 top YouTube creators here to the White House today. We're in the East Room, and they have set up their own YouTube sets right here in the White House for a very special YouTube video with a very special guest, the President of the United States. Now, they've been asking their millions of subscribers on YouTube what they should ask you in today's interview. None of those questions has the President seen before.
Are you and your family prepared for a grid failure? Shield yourself from blackouts with a home backup system or portable off-grid solar energy system from Off-Grid Depot. Off-Grid Depot also supplies water pumps, DC appliances, and other products for off-the-grid living. Power your prep. Bug out vehicle, shelter, or remote location with a power system from Off-Grid Depot today. Hey everybody, I'm Christopher Green and you're tuning into AMTV, Alternative Media Television. I just watched a very interesting interview of the President of the United States, which very few people, surprisingly, in the quote-unquote truther community have picked up on. An interview of the President by 3 well-known YouTube stars. In the following order: Hank Green of the Vlog Brothers, many of you are familiar with. Glozell Green, no relation, she wears green lipstick, best known for her cinnamon challenge where she stuffs cinnamon in her mouth and then begins to almost vomit on camera. And also Balking Like a Chicken. And a third YouTube star, Bethany Mota, very cute girl, I believe she's like 19 years old, all interview the President and serve up very specific and key questions. Isn't that interesting? Now, YouTube and Google act as the liaison on all this. They allege that the President had never seen the questions that were about to be asked, even though it's quite clear that, again, this is total and utter propaganda. It's lies. It's being used by the Obama administration. All these YouTube stars were coached on very specific questions ahead of time to serve a very specific agenda to the masses. And more importantly, and more specifically, reach the community that is most targeted by YouTube, which is the millennial generation, that again cares more about people like Glozell Green that choke on cinnamon and also balk like a chicken for entertainment. Kind of goes to show you how and why America is in the shitter. It's so down the tubes because very few of these people actually care about politics, they actually care about liberty, they actually know anything about the Constitution or anything about America at all. But again, what's very interesting about this interview is that it is clear and utter propaganda, and it can't be more obvious. Take Glozell Green, for example. She's an African-American lady. She's been on YouTube for, I believe, about 7 years. She's a YouTube star in her own right. Congratulations on all that. Again, if you can cough and puke up cinnamon and balk like a chicken, and that's entertaining to the masses, congratulations. You've been very successful. But she serves up very specific questions to the President of the United States, starting with the Sony hack.
All right, let's get started. My social media reaches over 5 million fans.
That's a lot of people.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're
And
a big star.
Yeah, especially now. But I feel like I thought I was able to say whatever I wanted to say, whenever I wanted to say, how I wanted to say it, because it was mine.
Right.
But then the Sony hacking thing happened.
Right.
And it's like, why didn't the government help Sony feel protected and safe enough to release the film on time? Because something like that, the fallout, affects me.
Which is very interesting. Of course, the President has an agenda. Washington has an agenda, and the interests that Obama serves, mostly large, gigantic corporations that own him, has a very specific interest in curbing the internet. And basically increasing the surveillance state that already exists here in the United States of America. You know, illegal wiretapping, these anti-constitutional practices at the NSA, things that have been exposed by countless whistleblower after whistleblower. Now, what's really interesting about this is, first of all, Glozell Green, if you watch any of her videos, you know would have zero interest in the Sony hack. In fact,
I would be surprised if she'd even heard of the Sony hack moments before she was coached by Obama's press corps to ask these very specific questions. The president goes into a long speech about why there needs to be more internet controls, why the government needs total Orwellian control of the internet, needs to better integrate itself with both private corporations and public institutions that make up the government today. So basically, what Obama says is he wants to take over the entire internet. He basically wants to clamp down on it like North Korea or China and just eradicate all the freedom that exists on the internet today.
Well, look, cybersecurity is a huge issue we've been working on since I came into office. And in fairness, the administration before me probably was starting to work on it, although the changes in the media have happened so fast and so much stuff is going online today that it becomes that much more important. The challenge we've got is that most of the internet and the infrastructure that allows you to be posting on YouTube and people accessing your stuff, most of that stuff's in private hands. It's not in public hands. And so what we have to do is to work with private companies, telling them, here's what we're seeing, here's how you can protect yourself, here's how you should share information with other companies who start seeing hackers getting into their stuff, so that everybody can pool the information and we can all protect each other together. And it moves very fast because these hackers you don't have to have a lot of equipment in order to be able to do this hacking. In fact, the hacking against Sony, which we believe was done by North Korea, it wasn't even that sophisticated, but it just goes to show how vulnerable we are. So we continue to do more with private industry to share with them best practices so how they can protect themselves. It's sort of like with your own ATM machine or ATM card or your passcode, your passwords, your personal privacy. There's certain things you can do to make yourself more protected. So we're sharing that information with them. But what we're also asking Congress to do is pass a law that would give us more tools to fight against this in the future. And I'm confident that this is something that we can actually get some good bipartisan support for. So you're going to be all right. People are going to still be able to watch your show. I promise.
But what's also very interesting about this is that if you've read any kind of articles on the Sony hack, you would know that after the fact, just like we had told you here from the get-go here on AMTV, and people said we were crackpot, conspiracy theorist, and lunatic, has all been proven to be correct, just like it is time and time again. In fact, if you've actually read any of the follow-up and studied any of the follow-up to the Sony hack and the president blaming North Korea as the key perpetrator, you would know, and this is just a fact now, that North Korea wasn't behind the attack. In fact, I have corroborating evidence to support this, not just from the New York Post, Time Magazine, Reuters, and several other quote-unquote mainstream media companies that all say it was an inside job. It points back and leads back to the State Department. The specialists in cybercrime and cyber terrorism say it leads back more than likely to the U.S. federal government and the NSA and that spy grid than it has anything to do with North Korea and Kim Jong-un. But again, she serves up that very specific question to the president to serve a very specific agenda. Followed by question number 2, where she says she has cut the hoodies off her husband's hoodies.
I have 3 family members who are in the law enforcement. And my husband, who painted that, yes, he's retired from the Air Force.
Well, we're grateful for his service. You tell him thank you.
I will do that.
Okay.
However, he's mad at me right now because I cut all the hoods off his hoodies. I did that for real to protect him because I'm afraid when he goes outside that somebody might shoot and kill him. And it's not like regular folks, it's the popo. I hope that this changes. How can we bridge the gap between black African American males and white cops?
Feeding into the president and the narrative of the race baiting that makes up Obama and his administration and igniting this very divisive race war in the United States of America, focused on Trayvon Martin, George Zimmerman, of course, acquitted by a jury of his peers, and also Michael Brown, Darren Wilson, also acquitted by a grand jury investigation, and also, more recently, but less reported, underreported, of course, by the White House, the federal government's decision and federal investigators' decision to drop the case against Darren Wilson. Because, of course, all the evidence supports Darren Wilson, not Michael Brown. So she serves that up because, again, That is meant to as a distraction. It's a distract campaign. It divides the masses, divides the people so that they lose focus on what's really happening, like Obama's totalitarianism to overtake the internet and lie with direct, bold-faced lies about, for example, North Korea being responsible for the Sony hack when they weren't responsible. It all leads back to the State Department, the U.S. federal government, and our intelligence agencies so they can serve up very specific internet legislation having everything to do with things like SOPA and CISPA, just refabricated and re-engineered, again, to turn this place into a totalitarian dictatorship, more like North Korea and places like China than what the USA has stood for several hundred years, thanks to our forefathers and an American, very violent and bloody American Revolution, by the way. She serves up a third question on Cuba.
Amen to that.
There you go.
Okay.
Okay.
I grew up in Florida.
Yeah.
And I have a lot of friends, close friends, who are Cuban Americans.
Right.
And I've heard the stories of their families escaping.
Right.
And some of them didn't even make it to come to the United States for a better life, to get away from the Castros.
Right.
Okay, I mean, the guy puts Dick in dictatorship. So I'm trying to understand how do you justify dealing with the Castros?
Isn't that interesting? Which has everything to do with the president strengthening ties and repositioning America's interests ahead of World War. Again, if you know anything about what's happening geopolitically at this very given moment in time in history, we are at war with Russia. It's one of the reasons that oil prices have been fabricated lower, artificially brought below $50 a barrel, why Saudi Arabia, our ally, is refusing to cut production, not only to hurt U.S. shale producers, but also to hurt the enemies of the United States, most notably Russia, and the geopolitical chess game in the Ukraine, and also countries like a nuclear-armed Iran. All of this a part of the agenda. Again, this all relates back to, has a lot of historical context, whether or not it's the Bay of Pigs, or it's the Cold War that many of you baby boomers grew up with, and the fear that we were at the brink of a nuclear event at any given point of time. Her fourth question has to do with same-sex marriage, again, to distract the masses, to focus on social issues.
This is dependent on the Supreme Court ruling, but do you think that same-sex marriage will be legalized in all of the United States during the time that you're in office? And what can you do to push that along?
So that you don't pay attention to this totalitarianism. You don't pay attention to the real agenda, the real wolf in sheep's clothing. Again, just a total distraction campaign, and it is basically used as a smokescreen to not just divide the masses, but to get them focused on something that they can get real passionate about while the president does whatever he wants, while he anti-constitutionally bombs, for example, Syria and starts a brand new war, or he continues his illegal drone strikes, etc. Again, things that most Americans aren't paying attention to are more focused on social issues like same-sex marriage or the marijuana debate than they are the president outright murdering people illegally and not getting constitutional approval to do it. So very interesting, Glozell Green, who wears the green lipstick, serves up a series of questions that I don't think, personally, if they asked me to serve up specific questions to the president in a specific way so he could just hit it out of the park and serve an agenda, I don't know if I could have orchestrated the questions in that specific sequence with that degree of accuracy. And you can just tell behind her eyes, Glozell has no idea what the president is talking about. I mean, honestly, I say this respectfully, but she appears to be very, very dumb. Again, this is a character best known for shoving cinnamon down her throat and balking like a chicken. And that's what people find entertaining here in the United States of America. In review, she brings up the Sony hack, which we know wasn't perpetrated by North Korea, according to the New York Post, Time Magazine, Reuters, and countless other investigators and cyber terrorism experts. She brings up racism, Trayvon Martin, Michael Brown, hoodies, etc. She brings up Cuba, which I guarantee she knows nothing about. Knows nothing about the historical context of the Cold War, the new war that we're fighting, what I believe to be World War III with Russia, falling commodity prices, this economic warfare, which looks much more like what we had with Japan prior to the bombing of Pearl Harbor than it does a small, minute war. And then same-sex marriage. Again, there's two other stars that do interview the president. Hank Green, Vlogbrothers, who seems to be the most intelligent, actually asks a few questions, a few curveballs of the president regarding drone strikes, big government. He's more than likely probably a Republican, but still serves up a softball on Obamacare for the president.
Well, we're almost out of time here, but I have brought a little something for you.
What do you got?
I'd like you to sign. So this is a picture of me holding a receipt from my pharmacy. I have a chronic condition.
That's a very fetching picture.
Well, thank you. And it's expensive to manage, but before I had insurance, I could not take this medication. It's about $1,100 a month, and that is a receipt showing it being $5 a month. So Obamacare has worked for me.
Has worked,
so,
and
thanks for
that makes me feel good.
Followed by the third, and not least, Bethany Moda, a very cute 19-year-old girl that really brings in more social issues. Again, to fill that narrative, to relay that narrative to millennials and her generation that like music videos and entertainment, pop culture, etc. She specifically talks about Boko Haram, which is interesting, something she probably, again, knows nothing about. What Obama calls a radical terrorist group in Nigeria that has been killing people, that has radical Muslim ties. Again, she probably knows nothing of this. This was just a question served by Obama's press corps. But again, the mention of Boko Haram feeds into that narrative of radical Islam. It feeds into the narrative of Obama's continuation and brand new wars in parts of the Middle East. The attempted destabilization of Bashar al-Assad's regime, really just a government in Syria. And also other countries like Ukraine, that the United States has been behind very aggressive, violent coups, arming rebels, terrorists, the same Al-Qaeda affiliates that were supposedly fighting to overthrow a once rightful democratically elected leader in the name of Viktor Yanukovych. So again, they can control the trade of petroleum-related products, natural gas, from Russia to the European Union, which, by the way, just instituted a new round of quantitative easing and bailouts into infinity. Again, this is a perfect example. This YouTube interview is just a perfect example of propaganda. It's a perfect example of the President of the United States and the people and interests that he represents being a wolf in sheep's clothing. This is a totalitarian takeover by Obama, again, and the people that he represents. They want more surveillance. They want to regulate the internet. He wants total control of private companies and their relationship to the internet. He says specifically that to Glozell Green that she'll still be able to do her channel, that she'll still be able to be a YouTube star as long as, the government with their all-seeing eye can oversee every action that's being taken. The third interviewer, the cute 19-year-old girl, specifically talks about cyberbullying, and the president gives another reason why there needs to be more intervention. She also mentions that she'd visited China recently. She can't visit the same websites. And the president says, and one thing he's right about, he says something specifically about the internet being very, very powerful, that has the ability to start revolutions in places like China, and that he says the Chinese government is very afraid of its own people.
I completely agree. My next question for you. So I was actually just in China. I travel a lot, and I connected to the internet, and I couldn't help but notice I couldn't access the apps and the websites that I do back home, and I just felt kind of isolated from like the online global community.
Right.
So how can we make them a part of that?
Well, China and Russia and some other countries around the world that don't have a democratic government and don't have the same traditions of free speech and an open internet, they have recognized, I think, that the internet's so powerful that if people start being able to communicate, then they may start criticizing the government, and then they may be able to mobilize opposition and things that are unfair, or people who are being mistreated suddenly have a voice. So they're trying to keep a lid on things, and we consistently, wherever we go, insist that issues like free speech and a free and open internet, we think that is part of who we are as a people. We think that has value not just in America but everywhere. We obviously can't make laws in China, but what we can do is let them know and shine a spotlight on some of those practices and indicate to them that that any government that is afraid of its own people and people just peacefully trying to speak out and voice their own opinions is, over the long term, not going to be as effective and as long-lasting as a government that trusts its people to be able to communicate freely.
Got it. Thank you so much.
Of course, that's one thing the president actually is right about, is that he himself and the people he represents and the U.S. federal government, which has been taken over and hijacked from its rightful constitutional principles, is very fearful of. They're fearful of you. They're fearful of the people. It's exactly why the President of the United States, the White House, and his press team are using YouTube, a very powerful platform to resonate with the masses, to resonate with millennials, to launch this distraction campaign. Again, you couldn't have served up these questions in a more specific, more strategic sequence if you tried. I don't even think I could do it unless they honestly physically had given me a specific list of bullet points asked the President of the United States to fit in to his agenda of totalitarianism, of surveillance, of more occupation and invasion of foreign countries, of more war in places like Syria, Iraq, and Afghanistan, which they've just propagandized with a brand new film of Chris Kyle called American Sniper that the people just buy into hook, line, and sinker. Again, this Obama interview, this interview of the President of the United States with these 3 specific YouTube stars is a fake. It's total and utter, believable, I guess, propaganda. Although if you really take a close look at it, you'll see it as a quite blatant example. I'm Christopher Green. Get this video out everywhere, make it viral, hard-hitting it in your face, and click the link below to support our sponsor.